Thank you, Mitch. These are the Millennium movies. Coming up next is From the Past, a Present, for the Future. But first is the fourth and final act with my Millennium movie. So far, we have had an epic movie from the golden age of Hollywood by National. Will gave us a movie adaptation of a classic fantasy novel, and Mitch gave us some spy action. I've always loved science fiction, especially when it changes the face of mankind by an event which changes everything. 2010. The Year We Make Contact, titled on screen as 2010, is a 1984 American science fiction film written, produced, shot, and directed by Peter Hyams. The film is a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey, and adapts Arthur C. Clarke's 1982 novel 2010, Odyssey 2. 2010 follows a joint American and Soviet crew who are sent to Jupiter to discover the reason behind the failure of the Discovery 1 mission. The film stars Roy Scheider, Helen Mirren, Bob Balaban, and John Lithgow, along with Keir Dullea and Douglas Rain, who reprise their roles from the previous film. The film was released in the United States on December 7, 1984. 2010, The Year We Make Contact received mixed reviews from critics, who praised the special effects, but considered the film inferior to its predecessor. It earned $40.4 million at the domestic box office against a budget of $28 million. In addition, background crew members on the Leonov are played by Victor Steinbach and Jan Triska, while Herta Ware briefly appears as Bowman's mother. Candice Bergen, credited as Olga Malls-Nerd, voices the SAL 9000. Arthur C. Clarke, author of the novels for 2001 and 2010, appears as a man on a park bench feeding pigeons outside the White House, visible in the letterboxed and widescreen versions. In addition, a time cover about the American-Soviet tension is briefly shown, in which the President of the United States is portrayed by Clarke and the Soviet Premier by 2001's writer, producer, and director, Stanley Kubrick. Originally, Tony Banks, keyboardist for the band Genesis, was commissioned to do the soundtrack for the film. However, Banks' material was rejected and David Shire was then selected to compose and conduct the score, which he co-produced along with Craig Huxley. The soundtrack album was released by A&M Records. Unlike many film soundtracks up until then, the soundtrack for 2010, The Year We Make Contact, was composed for and played mainly using digital synthesizers. These included the Synclavier by the New England Digital Company and a Yamaha DX1. Only 2 compositions on the soundtrack album feature a symphony orchestra. Shire and Huxley were so impressed by the realistic sound of the Synclavier that they placed a disclaimer in the album's liner notes stating, "No resynthesis or sampling was employed on the Synclavier." The Police's guitarist Andy Summers performed a track entitled 2010, which was a modern new wave pop version of Richard Strauss's Also Sprach Zarathustra, which had been the main theme from 2001, A Space Odyssey. Though Summers' recording was included on the soundtrack album and released as a single, it was not used in the film. For the B-side to the single, Summers recorded another 2010 bass track entitled To Hell and Back, though this appeared in neither the film nor the soundtrack album. I am going to play track 8 of the original motion picture soundtrack by David Shire, who composed and conducted the score. This is Monolith Invasion of Jupiter Transforms, from 2010, The Year We Make Contact.